everyone. Welcome back to Keep Indiana Learning's book study on The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. Today is episode 3 of our book study, and we are recapping chapters 5 and 6. My name is Melissa Wally, and I'm an innovation coach with Keep Indiana Learning. I also serve as an ed tech specialist and technology coach for Hanover Community Schools. And as usual, Diana Knox and I are here to dive into the book. Today's guest is Jonathan Winslow, a fellow Keep Indiana Learning innovation coach. Jonathan, do you want to tell a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks, Melissa and Diana, for having me. I'm really excited to dig in and talk to you about chapter 5 and 6 tonight. I am our director of elementary education up at MSD of Steuben County, and it's in the northeast corner of the state, about 10 minutes from Ohio, 10 minutes from Michigan. And I'm just really excited to talk about some of the concepts that were kind of brought forward in chapters 5 and 6 today.
Well, I'm Diana Knox. We are so excited that Jonathan is joining us today. And I am getting all discombobulated. It's a Monday. It has been the Mondayest Monday in a while because I'm leading up to fall break. So if those of you who are watching live and you're heading into the fall break season, we know what that's like. So I'm Diana Knox. I'm also an innovation coach for Keep Indiana Learning, and I am a technology instructional specialist for Clay Community Schools. And I'm over on the west central side of the state. And I am always excited anytime I can get together with Melissa and Jonathan and talk shop because they both have some fantastic insights. So let's dive in.
So this chapter I thought was interesting because it's really getting into the effects and what's happening with the great rewiring as is discussed in the book. And there's 4 factors that have combined. It's almost like the perfect storm to create this challenging environment for I don't even think it's just students or children. It's almost all people at this point. And it's really tapping in, unfortunately, to our adolescent brains because we know that they're not quite developed. And that's the part where it's really interesting to me. And I wish I had more of a middle school teaching background because I think I would be more attuned to like, oh yeah, I know more about that. Whereas my background in teaching is more primary. So, but it really is speaking to me as far as what challenges there are because we know kids like instant gratification. And we know that sleep deprivation was already a problem for kids. And now they're faced with social deprivation. And then they have this attention fragmentation, which is already troublesome for so many of them anyway. So I thought that those 4 factors coming together amongst this flip phone to smartphone to rise of high-speed internet, all of these things coming together is just causing like I said, the perfect storm. And then we have this social media introduction. So that to me is what spoke out as far as chapter 5.
Yeah, as I was reading, I drew that connection between not just the adolescents, but definitely I see things in my own behavior that I've been working on trying to maybe be a little more intentional about. But as an adult, I have that awareness, and our adolescents don't. They're going to need our help to do some of this because my background was high school. Now, I liked the older they were, the better. But I did teach some 7th and 8th grade every once in a while and a lot of freshmen and sophomores. And I can see a change when I'm in the classrooms and in the way that their attentions span because they've been wired a little differently. For that instant gratification. So I think that's one that is really interesting.
Yeah, and I'll add on, like most of my experience has been with elementary students, but even though they're not accessing social media in most cases, some of our older elementary students definitely are, there's still all of these 4 components are the part of a digital world. Like I notice when I go to the doctor's office, that instant gratification piece of, oh, there's not kids sitting there just waiting to be called in the waiting room anymore. They're eyes deep in some sort of device, playing a game or whatever the case is on an iPad. And so they're just constantly being engaged in something and don't have that idle thought, which I think leads to that sleep deprivation piece where when they get home, they don't want to go to sleep because they want to spend time on their tablet or their video games. And then that social deprivation piece, when you're at a doctor's office or somewhere at the grocery store, you'll see kids in the car as young as like 2 years old, on their parent's device, not interacting with the people at the grocery store or with their parents like they had been in the past. And I think, again, that leads to the fourth thing, that attention fragmentation. They're constantly being inundated with ways for that attention to go in lots of different places. So I think absolutely it's an issue for middle school and high schoolers, but we see it as young as 1.5 too, because what kid can you, most kids you can pass a phone and they know to swipe and to open it to get started in doing something on their phone.
And, we haven't had a lot of conversations about why this could be bad. And earlier in the book, he references, like, we didn't know the difference. That phone entertained, that tablet entertained the child when it was necessary. And so we didn't know what the implications would be years down the road. So now it's definitely going to be like a rewiring of our thinking as parents and mentors. And that, because I see it, I'm not a parent, but I have a nephew. He didn't know how to be bored. He doesn't know how to wait patiently and quietly without something to entertain him. He's a good kid, but sometimes it's like, hey, slow your roll. It's okay. Mm-hmm. So those are things, we have to really start thinking about at home and at school.
It's funny, Jonathan, you said doctor's office, and I thought instantly, I don't know why I thought of this, but I thought about restaurants and I thought about Cracker Barrel. And I thought about all the times going to Cracker Barrel, even as a child myself, but also with my kids, and playing the little golf tee triangle game. Yeah. And how like that was special. And that was like total engagement, either with a sibling or a cousin or an adult. And now it is a tablet or a phone, because it's, you have to sit and wait. So here's something to entertain you. Whereas that was such a good relationship builder and problem solving. So it was like double. But that's being replaced in so many situations. And I'm not faulting any parent, because I don't think anybody goes into this like, I just, with bad intentions. They're trying to do the best they can. A lot of times it's an educational app or a educational video. It's just a lot of it.
Yeah.
And I think it goes back to Diana's earlier point of like, this isn't just affecting kids, like it's affecting us. When you're at the Cracker Barrel or whatever restaurant, how many times do you take a second to look around and notice how many couples or how many families just aren't engaging with each other because they've made their phone or whatever the case is the center of that evening together? And so no longer is it, I want to come together and have dinner to socialize with my family. It's instead, I want to be next to my family, but I want to be socializing with the people that might not be around the table with me at that time. So that I find very interesting, just kind of looking around restaurants when I'm there and noticing that piece. I also think, students aren't getting as many experiences because of some of the conveniences that are offered. Like, there's so many learning opportunities I mentioned earlier at a grocery store. You can talk about price. You can talk about looking for ripe fruits and knowing what to look for with that. You can talk about getting things that are the farthest date out so that it lasts longer. You can have conversations with people that you don't know. And I think sometimes because of convenience, we go to the app and we order it for pickup. And I think that's super nice. It saves us lots of time because we're very busy people. But there's so many experiences for younger students that can happen within a grocery store too.
Well, and those are experiences that prepare them for their eventual adulthood when they are the independent person making those purchases and making those decisions. And, that's something we hear a lot about too. It's not really the topic of the book, but we hear a lot about how young adults are not prepared to go out into the world and manage finances and don't know how to do laundry and buy groceries. And, because that has coincided with this overcautious parenting and then this digital world where the world of conveniences, we do all this.
Yeah. I was at Aldi this weekend and I saw like a grandpa and a little one, and when they got the eggs out of the refrigerated section, they opened it and then they were explaining, like, you always open it up to look and make sure that they're all good. And I thought, oh yeah, that's such a good thing to do. And not that this child needed to do it at age 3, but they hear that and they hear that. And then, as it goes on, like you're saying, Jonathan, pretty soon it's, at age 6, maybe, can you go get the carton of eggs? Because they've heard it, they've learned it, and then there's that scaffolding of that release of responsibility. So I agree with you about that delivery. It's so convenient, but it is taking away a lot of experiences for our kids.
For sure. Well, and as I was thinking about, and I'm sure there's more that we need to talk about than these 4 areas, that instant gratification, sleep deprivation, social, and attention, I was thinking so much about the behaviors we're experiencing in K-12 right now, how heightened they are, and how directly linked they are to all of those areas. Absolutely. When we don't when we're not instantly gratified, we're upset. We're not in our right mind because we want what we want and we want it now. When we're sleep deprived, we're not thinking clearly. And oftentimes we have a heightened behavior because we didn't get the sleep that we needed. Socially, when we're socially deprived, we don't feel like we belong. We don't feel like we're a part of something bigger. And so we have behaviors coming out. And then when there's attention all over the place, because we can't focus on what we need to focus on, there's a lot of behaviors that come out. So I see that contributing to that increased behavior that we continue to see within our schools.
Well, and the idea, that social media world where we even, whether it's social media in the ways that we think of it with our Facebook, our Instagram, our Snapchats, TikTok. But then I think about the social world that gamers immerse themselves in as well. But I love how he explained that it's not just a tool, it's a world. Like we craft a whole separate life for ourselves in those worlds. And it's a world that's designed to be addictive. And we see that because it's the likes and the networking and the shares and you're looking to become that influencer or that. And then I think the natural thing then is that we draw comparisons. If I'm not getting the likes, then I am not as, I'm lacking because I'm not as pretty as, I'm not as put together as, I don't have the nicest things. So it's interesting to think about that social world that influences our young people so much.
When you look at the timeline, and 2009 is when the like button was introduced in Facebook, and Twitter introduced the retweet button. And so those 2 things went hand in hand pretty much. And then Facebook started the news feeds curated by an algorithm. And so all of that is feeding into that. And then push notifications were introduced, which goes into that attention, because how many times do you hear that and you have to look to see what it is because you might miss something. And then front-facing cameras in 2010. And I remember when that came out because I remember thinking, why would anyone want this? That makes 0 sense. And here we are. And then the high-speed internet. So all of that overloading of the brain just keeps coming at all of us at one time. And I mean, you can silence your notifications. There's things that you can do, but you have to go out of your way to do those things, to not have it coming at you.
Yeah, because they're pre-designed to hit you with those. You have to make that conscious choice to opt out.
Right.
And I think I was so shocked reading like an average user of their cell phone will get a notification every 5 minutes. And then a heavy user of lots of different tools on their phone would get one every minute of their day. And I was just so shocked and taken aback by that because, I mean, I'm guilty of this too. Like when I hear a buzz or something like that, like I'm going to attend to it. I think my app of biggest addiction is email, just because like that's the world I live in with work. So whenever I see an email come through, I'm like, oh great, or I'm like, oh yay, like because it means something good or bad typically that I need to deal with. but I just can't. I see myself getting totally distorted in my attention because of that. And so, like, just this weekend, I was working on some college courses and doing some work to get some assignments turned in. And I literally put my phone in the safe because I was like, I have to physically remove it from an area. And then to put on top, we've got smartwatches. So even when we're across the room and away from our phone, we're getting those notifications. So it's so interesting. As like one of the quotes came up is that smartphone has become a pacifier for so many people to avoid different things in their everyday life. And I feel that in my own.
Yes, absolutely. And don't you think, like, I've tried to take advantage of some of the features on my phone where when I go to work, it silences a lot of notifications on my phone, and at home at night, I'm exhausted. And so I have started to try to put my phone in another room to charge when I get home so that I can decompress and not, because if not, I'll catch myself doom scrolling. And especially if I have something I need to get done, I'll doom scroll versus be productive sometimes if it's a topic that I'm not sure about or that maybe is less than desirable, like, folding laundry and doing dishes.
Yeah, and I think about, I don't know if you guys have iPhones, but that Sunday alert that I get saying how much usage I had for the week, I dread opening that.
Oh, I turned it off.
To see.
Mine is off.
I have one every day that pops up. I'm the lone Android user, but I get every day it kind of shows me where I've spent my time. And like you, Jonathan, email drives a lot of mine, but I've even started to try to break some of those bad habits I picked up, 4 or 5 years ago during a different time in our world, where I worked all the time and I needed to, and I'm trying to break those bad habits. And so I'm like, especially if social media trumps the email, that's when I know it's been a bad day, but I really am striving to keep those numbers down.
Yep. But it has to be conscious. That's the thing. And we know our adolescents, our teenagers don't always have that ability.
So how do we help them? Because that's going to have to be a home and a school partnership almost, because technology can't go away in education. That's the way of our world. And our kids have to be prepared to use technology in their future lives. And it can't go away completely at home because, when you're out, parents need a way to communicate with their children and this and that. But we've got to really work together to think about conscious ways we can be more intentional, both at home and at school.
And I think that's a conversation that we have with our digital citizenship instruction, because I think we've talked about how we can be safe online. We've talked about our digital footprint. We've talked about, all the things that cyberbullying, all of those pieces, but I don't think we've talked enough about limiting our time and what that looks like and how we can put those things in place.
And if we have, I think that there's been a lot of, well, you can do this instead of being on your phone. You can do this activity or have a screen-free day. But I think there has to be some real conversation about what that looks like silence your notifications when you're working on your homework. Some real things that students can put into practice on a daily basis, not a once in a while. I think that will help.
And I don't know if you mind me asking, but our high school, because of the new law, getting rid of cell phones in classrooms, how's that going?
Yeah, so our high school, they can't use them during class, but they can use them during passing periods. But I have heard students saying things that they feel like they are able to attend more. And here at the middle school, they're not allowed to have them at all. And the same for watches. I haven't heard anything bad about it.
Yeah,
I've heard positives too. I haven't checked in on it lately, but I know at the beginning of the year, there were people that was like, some of the students, they said even were like, it's kind of nice to not have that obligation because it becomes an obligation. And so they kind of enjoyed that ability to step away.
We've experienced that too. And I think one of the things, though, the students that are heavy users are looking for ways to still have access and connection to that world. So I think our tech department's really been kind of working through like, oh, well, they're now trying to get to some of the things they would on their phone with their devices. And so they're definitely being creative with that.
Well, that's, I mean, as an addiction, an addict will do anything they can to get their fix. And in this case, that tech is that fix. And it's a hard one to break.
It is.
For sure. Well, and that's all they've known, like
Yeah.
the students that are in high school now. Yeah. So, yeah, with that addiction, it is, you know, when you know that the creators are intentionally doing things to get them hooked. I mean, that's scary when you think about it that way. It's intentional, purposeful.
Mm-hmm.
And then we know that the students are they're like victims because they're just sitting there waiting for likes and approval on social media, and it's so harmful to them. And then you have the creators of the apps that are doing these things for that cycle.
Mm-hmm. And they don't even know that they're becoming the victims in this. And I thought it was so interesting when we transition into chapter 6, where they talk about how much more harmful social media is for girls than it is for boys, and why that is. And boy, were there some shocking insights in chapter 6.
Right. And like when I read the one part, it said about relational aggression, and I thought, oh yes, we do that every year for our yearly training. That always comes up that girls have more relational aggression. That's part of our online training every year for bullying. And then when I read it, and I thought that makes so much sense, because to girls, the thought of taking away their friends and taking away their reputation, that is everything to them. And that is what social media is. And so the thought that that could be taken away or affected negatively, that can put a student into a state of depression, just a negative feeling about themselves. And it's hard to undo that once that's there.
Mm-hmm.
It goes back, it made me think back to my ed psych class as an undergrad, where we talked about the different ways kids play together, and how boys feel like they're playing if they're in the same room as each other. Like they can be doing two totally different things and feel like they're playing together because they're in the same room. And girls oftentimes have to be extremely connected to the person that they're in the room with to feel like they are playing with another girl at a young age. And I think that shows itself in the social media piece, and how girls don't oftentimes have as deep of connections because they're mostly communicating through social media, and that's contributing to that feeling of isolation and the comparison that takes place between girls.
Oh, and especially in this world of filters and all of the fake accounts and the spamming and that happens to young girls, that, you know, comparison is the thief of joy. Mm-hmm. And it is so true, because you will see girls just deflate. And I think we were talking in a meeting I was in last week, and it's because girls haven't like had that developing a relationship in person, they just say whatever without any filter. So not only do we get filters on our pictures, but our words don't have a filter then. So that's like that antithesis of it, and it's hurtful.
Yeah.
I always think too, like girls share their emotions so much more readily. Girls and women, we share our feelings, we share our challenges. And I thought this was very interesting when they start talking about depression, and they talked about happiness. We've talked about happiness. If you surround yourself with happy people, you're more likely to be happy, and happiness clusters follow each other and they get larger. But with women, depression had a stronger reaction and a stronger sharing it out. So if I am depressed, it is way more likely that people near me are going to become depressed as well. And I thought that was interesting, that was more contagious. But I think I do see that when negativity breeds negativity. And I've caught myself in that cycle where I'll be in a room and it's like a dump. and people are just angry. And then I'll catch myself and I jump in and I take part, and then I step out later and I'm like, what happened? That wasn't me. I don't feel that way. What did I do? And if you continually surround yourself with that, I think it's only natural that that's how you become caught in that cycle.
Mm-hmm. Or you could see a student sees an account where somebody is saying certain things, even if they're negative, or acting a certain way, or looking a certain way, and they're getting likes and follows, then they think, well, I should do that too. I'll get likes and follows.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that negative behavior is getting rewarded.
Mm-hmm.
It's viewable by everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting that with men, that didn't have that same correlation. Men weren't affected by a woman's depression. And then I liked the mention that when women get together, they sit and they talk. They might have an activity, but there's a lot of talking and sharing of emotions. But when men typically get together, they're doing something. They go play golf, they cut wood, they, depending on your lifestyle, there's an activity involved in it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, like, I'm a pretty sensitive male, so I kind of see myself in both areas. Like, I love to sit and just chat away. But I also, like, when I hang out with my male friends, we're typically going to do something where at the end of it, something's going to be accomplished. So I found that so true.
Absolutely. And as an adult, I, again, have that awareness that I can be negatively impacted by the people that I'm around. And I've been in that period of life where I was not mentally healthy and I struggled. And man, that was a battle to get out of. But I think on the other side, that's one thing I try to be way more intentional about who I put in my world and who I put in my circle and what's genuine and what's not, because it's so easy to get caught up. Easy to get caught up.
Right. And again, I mean, look at our ages and the conversation we're having right now. And then you think somebody who's 12 or 13, they don't have that experience. They don't have that ability to say, like, I have to separate myself. I can't fall into that.
And if we don't do something, that cycle is going to get worse, because these people have been rewired. They're going to become the parent in the situation, and there's not going to be, and you think about that, and I already hear young kids talk about, well, my parents care more about their phone than they do me. And, I'd ask mom, but, she's got her phone and I'm not supposed to bother her. And I think, oh, what could things be like 25 years from now? If we don't try to bring that connection back in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, the other scary thing I got out of chapter 6 was how much more girls are vulnerable to predation and harassment online than males are, and why that is. And really, that's kind of the latter part of chapter 6, like around page 166, where he starts talking about some of that. And because girls are attracted to that followers and likes, and it makes them vulnerable to those predators who can sneak in and groom them or charm them or harass them. It's scary.
Well, I think that goes into the conversation with kids of, like, what's good attention and bad attention, because, like, a lot of times students crave any attention. And so helping them understand the difference between the two, I think, is really important. And again, I think it goes back to that digital citizenship instruction, and how do we help students recognize when this is not good attention and we need to be really aware. I mean, I think we talked a lot as a kid when I was young, like, I did kind of grow up as everything was evolving. Like, high school or high-speed internet was happening when I was a senior in high school. So I feel like I was not definitely the Gen Z era, but millennial. I'm a younger millennial, and so I saw a lot of that happen. And we talked about in real life staying away from strangers. But when we think about the life we live in now, like, I now open my phone and have a stranger pick me up from a parking lot to take me somewhere with Uber. Like, and would I have ever done that as a kid? No.
No, because you don't talk to strangers and you don't get in the car with somebody you don't know. And now we pay people to do that for convenience.
We blurred these worlds. And so that's why it's so difficult for kids to understand that good and bad attention, I think, sometimes.
I think you really hit on something with Digital Citizenship Week coming up. That is such a good conversation and a good place that we need to maybe be putting some more emphasis to help our students. And I think too, like, I've talked a lot about it's that partnership between families at home and schools too. So I know in our district, one of my pipe dreams is I would love to do some more activities and involvement with parents where we can have conversations about some of this stuff, because I sometimes think parents are overwhelmed and they don't know where to start and they don't know how to do it and they don't know how to have the conversations. And they don't even understand it themselves because they're just fumbling and trying to do what they can with technology, and the kids tweet and snap circles around them. So it's something that I think definitely needs attention in the future when we think about digital citizenship. I think that's a great place to put it, Jonathan.
Yeah, and I think it needs to be year round. Like we need to be like, yes, we do need the week. We need a little highlight week, but these lessons have to be year round. And if you have a computer class, that's great, but it also needs to be, everybody needs to be involved in this, not just one teacher that's teaching it to everybody. I think it has to be a school initiative.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I agree. Something that was touched on that I know can be uncomfortable to think about, but it went into that girls being vulnerable to predation and harassment. And I think that it is something that we've been hearing a lot more about, but the idea of when girls send sensitive pics and then those get shared. And it's such a different attitude when males do it versus when females do it. And I think that is a conversation that has to happen too, that it's not okay for either. It's not something we should be doing. But girls are so vulnerable and so likely to be ridiculed and labeled when something like that happens. And that can really be a traumatic thing at that pivotal time in somebody's life.
Yep. Yeah. I agree with you. I mean, it could really change their trajectory for their school career. I could see how that could totally change somebody.
Yeah. Well, that gets us to kind of through the meat and potatoes of chapters 5 and 6 in part 3. There's still a couple more chapters in part 3 of the book to really kind of wrap this up, but this was a heavy set of chapters, and boy, did I enjoy the insight that I got from both of you. So I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah. This is not a fun book to read, but I feel like it's an important topic, and I feel like it's there's a lot of connections.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, with that being said, I think we're ready to wrap up for today. And if you're joining with us live, in a couple of weeks, we'll be back with the rest of part 3. And we dive more into some of these same stressors and indicators of what happens. But if you're following on the on-demand, the next episode will be ready. And we are hoping that you're getting something meaningful out of it and insights. And hopefully this is sparking conversations in your world, both at home and at school. So thanks for joining us. And we will see you for our next episode.